Welcome to the Living Legends segment. I am Fayaz Qureshi. 37 years ago, with his father and brother in tow, he presented financing proposals to banks for a manufacturing venture. None of the banks bought into his vision. They opted to turn to people close to them, and they supported their idea. The firm they created has now become the largest oil processing firm in the region. On the Living Legends tonight, we speak to industrialist Vimal Shah, who is chairman of Bitco Africa. Vimal, welcome. It's an extreme pleasure to have you on the Living Legends segment. You are an absolute legend.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So Vimal, let's set the ball rolling. Let's start off with your early life, where you were born, and your educational background.
Well, I was born in Nyeri, and that was in 1960. And of course went to Nyeri Primary School in Nyeri, and then moved on to Nairobi. Went to High Ridge Primary School in Nairobi, and then finished my Standard 7, went to Jamhuri High School.
Oh, Jamhuri School.
Jamhuri High School.
I'm a Jamhuri boy as well.
Great, so you're alumni too.
Yes.
And from there went to Aga Khan High, and then went to USIU in Nairobi, and graduated from USIU Nairobi with a bachelor's degree in business management.
So tell us the transition thereafter now. You're out of university. Your family was in the clothing business at one point. What was the trend then? And I'll link it to another question. What drove your family to get into the detergent and soap enterprise? So
my father was in garment manufacturing and doing garments called Bitco Clothing Factory. And during my university education, I looked at that business and said, what do we do with this business? Where do we take it from here? Because doing my administration, I was doing my studies on it. And, we said this could go backwards from making garments into textiles, weaving textiles, spinning, and then the whole cotton value chain. On the business side, we put this feasibility study out and crafted a whole story around the value chain, going from garments all the way backwards, and then looking at the whole seed value chain. Because when you do cotton farming, you get the lint, which is the fiber,
right?
But you also get the seeds. And looking at the seeds, we looked at that whole seed value chain. You crush the seed, you get oil, you get animal feeds from it, you get the oil, you refine the oil, and then the byproduct, you can make soap out of it. So having charted all that out, created a whole feasibility study for the thing, and said what do we do as a family? And I think that's the time when my brother also was with me, Tarun, and my father, BD Shah. The name Bitco comes from him, apparently.
Oh, I see.
BD Shah, so BD company. And it was running since 1970 as a clothing factory. So by doing that, we actually put it out and say, look at this value chain. This garment value chain at that time, right, was going down because of all our cheap imports, and also cotton was not in favor at that time.
A very competitive industry at that point in time.
And the Far East was really competitive in bringing their polyesters and rayons. And people wanted a iron-free fabric, so that was a big thing. But looking at the value chain, looking at this side of the story of seeds, seed crushing and all that consumer product, the products were standardized, right? Number one. Number two, the cycle time for products, because it's not a fashion industry. So in our garments industry, the whole lead time for converting from cash, the cash cycle is 180 days. You make the garment, you make a fashion, you put it out there, people buy it or they don't buy it. If they don't buy it, it's dead.
Yeah, that's the turnaround time.
So the fashion industry has 30 to 40% dead stock because a color doesn't work or a design doesn't work and it's gone. Then you got to sell it at a very fraction of the cost. So big issue. Again, shopkeepers use you as a financier, so you are a banker for all the shops, and that's why we had shops where you saw us there. And I think the issue around the edible oils and crushing was far different because the cycle times are faster. Product is standardized, and of course it's a mass market.
It's a consumer product.
So that's when we said, okay, let's go with this feasibility study, and then went bank to bank, right? And said, here's my feasibility study, have a look at this. So first thing, they look at you and say, I'm 21 years old, and say, young lad, thank you for putting this up, but what's your experience? And I said, no experience. Have you ever done this before? Never done
Brilliant idea, but nobody to support you.
Good idea, but you've never done this before. And where's your experience? So that's whole concept, which is what I relate with a lot of young startups today. They have the same problem. People asking them, what's your experience? Have you done this before? And they fail. The point then was, talking to others, they said, look, but you know what? East African Industries is very dominant on this one. And they may kill you. So Unilever may kill you there. And that stuck in the brain at the back to say, okay.
So you're going against a big giant at that point in time.
Yeah, we were looking at, because there was Kimbo and Cowboy and stuff like that being sold. So we said, okay, let's go against that in terms of processing the same products. And the idea was not accepted by bankers, and there was no funding available for that.
So how did you eventually get the capital to finance your dreams?
So having got rejections again, like my insurance industry, having rejections from a lot of people saying, we can't fund it, we don't have the funds for it, and going to IFC. IFC actually gave us a good idea, one of the heads there. He gave us an idea to say, start small and go one by one, go backwards from the front end, start back and then go backward linkage. Or start from the first end of farming and then go forward linkages. And
any help from friends and family at that point in time?
So at that point we said, okay, where do we start from? So we said, let's start from the soap side and then go backwards. It was all friends and family, right?
Initially.
Initially they supported us and said, fine, start with it. And a friendly banker, right, who knew my father, and they now run I&M Bank, and Biashara Bank was there.
Of course.
And they helped us in terms of saying, okay, here's some funding. And we got that. We also got
Suresh
IDB.
Shah, right?
Suresh Shah. But we also got IDB, who helped us initially with $1 funding there. And that was the initial phase of starting very small. So we started off very small, and then we wanted to go backwards all the time. And then the story continues, and we started doing that from 1985 onwards.
Going back to you, that was the era of monopolies and price controls. How did you navigate a field that was dominated by East Africa industries at that point in time?
Yes, it was an interesting area because the government was doing price controls, and every time you'd have East Africa industries going there and putting up prices and saying, this is the price, and then they'd argue with it. So we were a player in the market when we started with our soap plant first, and then we went backward into oil, and of course into refining and all that stuff. So when we did that, we became a player. And therefore we had to go together with East African industries to the government and say, this is what you should do for price controls. And we were advocating for removing of price controls, but really it's like the petroleum thing today, price control. But it's guaranteeing a market, guaranteeing a margin. I wish today we had the same as what petroleum has, because you're guaranteed a margin. Now when they opened the floodgates, then competition came in, and really it changed the whole concept. So at that point it was a tough call, because you had to go and show them your costings, and they would give you a margin on that. Today it's competitive. It's like you can lose money, right, if you're not careful, if you're not really on top of your game. So it's a changed world.
And what was the real breakthrough for Bitco? At what point would you go back in time and say, that was the breakthrough for Bitco?
I think the unique differentiating point for us was even Unilever East Africa Industries at that time was bringing in refined oils and just packing it here. We were bringing in crude oils, and bringing in crude oils, processing it here, complete, full value chain. So we had zero wastage, number one. Number two, across the value chain, we had our costs very much in control. And we did Kaizen from then, and to look at what is our cost and where is our competitiveness. We went into plastics straight away. We didn't go into the tins that Kimbo was in. And of course, ultimately, we went for market share and mass market share. So we could create a soap that they didn't have. Our soaps were far better in terms of the bar soaps, and we could do marketing better.
So it was prudent financial management.
Prudent plus also management. I think everything we talk about is management. If you manage it well, you actually look at lean or Kaizen, you can make it work, and of course, faster decision making. So I'll tell you the story there. If they needed to go and put up a fractionation plant, they wouldn't get the access to money as Unilever, because they say, hey, why do that? We could do it straight away, and we went into it. And we went the full value chain. So that way, we had many more products, many more varieties, and we could spin things around much faster. So having faster decision making here helped us a lot. And that's one thing I think a lot of Kenyan startups can really beat the multinationals at that game.
And as you grew, you acquired brands from the competition, isn't it?
So,
I mean, what's the process of acquiring the soft part of it, meaning the intellectual property around the products and the legal status?
So the global stage was changing. I think Unilever had a new CEO, and he said, we're too big all over the world, and we're not focused. And he said, I want to have 400 brands, grow globally. Each brand would be $1 billion.
Wow.
And therefore, they sold off 4,500 brands across the world. So the brands that were famous here, Kimbo, Cowboy, and Tiger, and we bought them all over, right? So that was the IP we bought. I mean, the same way they sold so many big brands, or not big brands, but smaller brands which were coming up.
Yeah.
And that could give them the mass market. they just gave them up and they sold them. So we bought them. And for us, it was fitting in our strategy.
So that was a very strategic move from your part, wasn't it?
Yes, because we had a very clear-cut goal, right? It was to grab, grow, and sustain #1 market share in the African markets by 2030. At that time, that was the goal. So in 2002, when they came out with this sale that we're selling this, we said, let's go in straight away.
Who was the decision maker at that point in time? Was it you?
It was me and my father and my brother, all three together. In fact, it was a very interesting one because it was done in a room where we had our lawyers, ourselves, all of us, the whole board of Unilever, and their lawyers, and it was a lock-in. You couldn't say anything. In 3 days' time, your dinner, lunch, everything in there, you finalize, you come out with a yes
because
or no.
these were very strategic decisions which
Very
led to huge success.
Absolutely.
As we reflect back.
Same time, in Unga Group had a new philosophy that Unga Group was, a new CEO comes in there and says, I want to change everything. I want to focus only on milling, become the biggest milling in East Africa. So they said they have Elianto in Nakuru, and they were crushing the byproduct corn germ there, and they said they're selling that off. We said, fine, let's buy it because Elianto was a big brand name. So we acquired the bank. We
Elianto was big.
We acquired that name.
Yes.
We acquired that business.
Yes.
And that also fitted into our strategy.
Yes.
So that gave us...
That was a great acquisition.
That gave us a crushing...
Because you bought a brand.
Bought the brand and the assets because we could now go into crushing, which was our philosophy from day one, to go from soap to oil to crushing to seed farming and then go to cotton. Seed farming.
Progressed right through.
Yes.
Now, getting the firm, you've expanded Bitco Group and now have a footprint in East Africa. Now, how would you compare the business environment in Tanzania and Uganda compared to Kenya? How has the regional integration progressed over the years between the East African community bloc?
I think we've done a lot in East Africa. It's opened up a lot of avenues, but we've been very slow in East Africa. And I think we still have a problem within our own Kenyan, Ugandan, Tanzanian. They still think about protecting their own industries, right? Whereas we should be looking at it from a single destination, single point, and we should be looking at the whole of Africa as our markets. So we're doing well in Uganda right now. Tanzania also has been a basket case for us because there's a problematic area. They actually removed all, they actually added the duties on our raw materials. And therefore the entire industry, not only us, all the other people have stopped manufacturing in Tanzania and they're now importing. So Tanzania has been a big case. Just 3 months ago, they've now changed it to say, fine, we will now move to the East African tariff, so that's happening. Uganda is amazing. I think Uganda is really the biggest winner in East Africa because they ramped up their manufacturing.
When you compare Uganda and Kenya?
I think Kenya is losing it. Uganda is gaining by far, straight away. Because
they're creating an enabling environment?
They're so invested.
For all investment, for all businesses?
Investor-friendly.
Which is a bit more difficult here?
Uganda is the most investor-friendly country in East Africa. Then I would put Rwanda, and of course Kenya comes third.
Why is that, sir?
I think our own administration...
Is it rigid rules and regulations which we aren't prepared to change and give that flexibility?
Yeah, we've siloed ourselves so much. The silos in all our governments right now, even right now as we speak, the government is so siloed that everybody speaks a different language. And then everybody's charging different charges and costs and all that stuff. So our competitiveness into East Africa has been eroded today, right? So we're more competitive in Uganda or in Tanzania to be exporting to Kenya. But Kenya's manufacturing costs have gone up, power costs have gone up, the taxes that have gone up, the levies. And I think our tax policy is not pro-manufacturing. It's actually saying, let's all go and milk the cow, whereas we're not expanding ourselves. In agribusiness, I would say we've got a lot more going, but we're not really doing it well. I think our agriculture has been murdered in Kenya, and it's not really growing. It's sad.
It's supposed to be such a big industry for us.
So I just look at it from a positive angle because I remain optimistic. I think the opportunity for really opening up agribusiness and agriculture in Kenya is big. At the same time, manufacturing, huge opportunities to just make ourselves competitive. And really look at our competitiveness relative to exporting to Uganda and Tanzania. A lot of Ugandan Tanzanians have blocked our exports because they're putting in duties and taxes. And that's where our lobbying has not been strong enough. I think we need to really go that route and say, fine, allow them to export what they're competitive, cheaper at, and we need to export our manufacturing.
A very critical question. The last few months have seen your sector lobby the central bank on access to foreign currency for your raw materials. What's the status now? What has been going on for the past couple of months? In a nutshell, what is really happening?
I think it's a sorry state of affairs because central bank tries to say, when we speak to central bank says it's the banks that they're holding foreign currency. And the banks tell us we don't have flows of foreign currency. The central bank needs to be able to provide that to us. And the bid-offer spread in the markets, if I have a Bloomberg screen or a Reuters screen, the bid is at 118, 119, and the offer is at different rates. On the screen it's showing at 119, 119.70. But on offer, when I talk to the banks, they offer 125, 123, 127. And those people who are exporters, they're still selling at 119. Of course, in the last 2-3 days, it's just moved up to 121 now on screen. But still, the point is that this market needs to be liberalized. I think central bank needs to work on that quickly. Probably we were told it's pre-election issues around election money laundering or whatever coming through, but that's over now. And I think that's something that where the spread needs to come down. The central bank is the only one, along with the bankers, along with the private sector, who can address this and say, fine.
Because remember, you had to just look at XC and the rate that was indicated there. You had to pay about 60, 70 cents more and you'd get access to your dollars.
Absolutely.
And as long as your documentation was fine, you could get even $10, $20 million. This issue was never there. And this difference between 119 and 125, and exporters being paid 119, so they're pretty annoyed right now that the banks are selling at 125 and we're being paid 119. So they're going to start holding their funds as well. Now it depends how long their holding power is. But what's the solution? You need to either devalue and come to what the current rate is, so the exporters are given what they deserve, and then we go back to what our markets were before. And automatically have the ability. And there's also been a state of panic, isn't it? Because a report I read that a month ago they had 8 billion shillings equivalent of dollars being held in banks, in customer accounts.
I think there's enough dollars in the market. There's enough dollars with central bank. So reserves are not a problem.
But there's a panic. If you ask the bank, they say, we can't give you more than 20,000. We can't give you more than 30,000. A person like you, an industry that possibly needs $1 million a week, how do you cope with this situation? And how do you address this? Because it's extremely important and crucial. It has to be addressed.
I think it's now post-election. And I think that's where the clamor was, that it could be because of that. But now it should be opening up. And I think either it moves right or left, which means either it goes up or it comes down, and then you have liquidity. The biggest problem is liquidity and opening up that market, because if you need the dollars, you're not getting it. What's also happened on our bond, infrastructure bond, the yields have gone up very, very high, because the prices went down. Again, political uncertainty.
Yeah.
So I think this is where we need to bring that stability back to those markets, immediately address that. I think interest rates is another issue that will be addressed or will have to be addressed by the banks, by central bank, and to look at if the interest rates globally have gone up, are we going to increase our interest rates? And that's where, again, it goes back to a government philosophy. So I think immediately next week, when the handing over goes on and whatever happens, we really need to get our hang on what do we do about the exchange rate.
What will happen if the interest rates are raised, the repercussions?
If you raise the interest rates up, right, and you see on treasury bills or bonds,
it will help tackle inflation?
It will bring in flows, and those flows will then help to boost up our liquidity sources. So again, a lot of people...
so it's a bitter pill to swallow initially.
It's not an easy one, but it's to do with interest rates, it's to do with the gap in the financing, and it's to do with our reserves. It's also got to do with petroleum prices, right? It's our import bill that's gone up, and now from September onwards it should come down. So I think this is something that can be managed.
But the fuel subsidies are going, right, at the end of September?
Yes.
Pressure from the IMF?
So government, again, it's got to go back to government philosophy, because when government philosophy is we're not going to spend more, or we're going to borrow more, or what are we going to do? This is where I think that central bank may be looking for a lead from the newly elected government who comes in and really make sure this works well. Because Kenya is one case that really stands out. We're pro-liberalization, we're open, but really get our handle on this.
But we've got a global economic problem. Our hands will be tied. It's not going to be an easy ride.
It's not. I don't think it's going to be an easy ride for central banks. It's not an easy ride for the world. Relatively speaking, right, we're far better off than a lot of other markets in Africa. So that's the saving grace for us as Kenya. We're not as badly off as other countries. They've done a good job. So far, I would say central bank has done a good job, They've kept it in good condition. The macro, the foreign, the fiscal and the monetary affairs are really well handled. KRA, you saw, had a record collection. I think there's a spending side that's seriously a problem, and our government needs to remove wastage. By wastage, I mean anything that's corrupt, theft, or whatever, right, in government. That needs to be controlled on a massive scale, and this is where I think everybody coming in has got to show their leadership. I think that's happening already. People are saying, we will stop corruption, we will stop XYZ, and that's got to be the call of the day.
Finally, to wind up this great session we've had with you, what would be your message to Kenya as we come to a close to this political season?
I think when we went on the 9th, we went to the polls, we put our name and number to whoever we choose for, and that's it. Once we put it in there, we've done our job. And let all the rest be left by whoever's handling it. I think that's important. At the same time, in the end, why do we have leaders? It is the time for every single person to show their leadership, including people who voted, right? Let's show our leadership to say, where are we going? This Kenya nation building, right? It's not just like a start-stop, and it starts now in the next 5 years, ends. And I think politicians probably look at it from a 5-year angle and say, it's the end of my story. We've got a long way to go. And I think this is where let's build Kenya, because Kenya is amazingly positioned in Africa. We've got everything that we
very strategically located, isn't it?
Geostrategic location is amazing. We've got access to the ports. We have a centralized position in Africa. We've been liberal. We've had very good administration so far. In fact, we've never defaulted on any of our loans as a country. We've got a lot of pluses. And we shouldn't let that go away, right? And I think this is the time to say, let's build on this with leadership to leapfrog to the latest. Our youth, amazing digital awareness. I think let's just give them the empowerment. Let's start looking at things from a different angle. The ACFTA Africa is opening up for markets. Why are we not looking bigger, right? And we're still stuck in our own county or our own ward, and we're stuck with that. And I think leadership, in my opinion, everybody's got a leader. Arouse that leader to say, I want to see that in my leader. Now, the people who have won, and 16,000 people stood for elections. 14,000 people didn't make it. They learned what to do better next time. The 1882 who went in there, it's also time for them to show leadership to say, I am now the leader of my ward or my county, and I got to unite everybody together. I'm the MP, I'm the senator, or I'm the governor, and I'm the president of a country. We need to unite, we need to come together and be one country that is solid. Because at the end of the day, we did have a split vote. It was 50-50, whichever way you look at it.
Yes.
0.9, 0.5 doesn't make a difference. But the difference it makes is that we're still one country. We have no plan B. Let's be peaceful, but at the same time, yes, let's get that justice, because our national anthem says it all. Wajibu wangu. And I think wajibu wangu is, what's my responsibility this time? Whoever comes in, is it going to change me? Is it going to change them? But let's hold them responsible. Let's hold them accountable, and let's all start creating scorecards of what you promised and what you're delivering on a day-to-day, weekly, monthly basis, and really start delivering on promises.
Let them be accountable. Let's be optimistic for a peaceful Kenya.
It doesn't matter, seriously, in my opinion, it doesn't matter who comes in. Ultimately, it's, do they have Kenya at their heart? Number one. Number two, are they going to stop that wastage? Corruption.
Isn't it very important to have that nationalism, that patriotism?
Yes.
That is very important, isn't it? To feel proud that I'm Kenyan and I need to make a difference. And how do I make a difference? By casting my vote.
Yes.
Because that's what makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. And I think the important point there is that everybody who casted their votes, and those who didn't cast their vote also cast their vote to say, I don't care who comes in, right? Because then it's apathy, right? The point is, you've cast your vote. Let's make sure. I think we have people who want to make a difference. We have people who want to do the right thing. Let's make sure they do the right thing. Let's all help them together and say, fine, let's make sure we do it right. The fears that people have about this will happen, that will happen, is all fears. And I think this is where we got to remove the stereotyping. I would say, like in other countries, you look at, give an amnesty to whatever happened in the past, but now going forward, there should be no more. If I've got a tank that's leaking, there should be no leakage from the tank anymore. Right? If it happened in the past, if it happened in the past and the water's flown, you can't do anything about it.
The past to the past, move forward. And we could speak for hours and hours. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to a real living legend. thank you so much
Thank you,
for
Faiz.
being with us on the Living Legend segment. COVID
Thank
days
you very
but
much.
are over, so we can shake hands. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been a pleasure speaking to Vimal Shah, chairman of Bitco Africa Group. His insights on manufacturing, public policy, and the vision of a farm-to-fork model are enlightening. We thank Vimal for being our guest on tonight's edition of The Living Legends. Thank you for watching. I am Fayaz Qureshi.